exchange is going to continue, it's going to be deeper and deeper.
Any collaboration is very welcomed.
Inspire ourselves in the Chinese model, which is much more autonomous.
To borrow the boats to reach the sea.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special program, China-Latin America Youth Roundtable. I'm Wang Guan in Rio de Janeiro. Greetings from Brazil. Now, China-Latin America relations have come a long way in the past few decades. What are the state of relations between China and Latin America and Caribbean countries right now? And where are they headed in the foreseeable future? And what are the relations in the eyes of the Latin Americans themselves? I do have a cutting-edge group of young people with us today. Without further ado, let me get to them. We have, first of all, Mr. Leonidas López, who is the General Administrator of Latin American Informative Alliance. Welcome, sir. Great to see you.
Thank you.
And also we have Ms. Raquel Santos García. She's a special social affairs specialist with the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America. Marina Moreno de Farias is a special researcher with Observer China. Welcome. And last but certainly not least, we have Sofia Pontieri with Rio State University. Welcome. It's so good to have all of you. Our program will be watched by a lot of viewers in China and hopefully around the world. I think this is a great opportunity for the Chinese to hear the voice of Brazilians, of Colombians, of our friends in Latin America. And this is exciting. Let me start with you, Lopez, which is really a general question, and I want to ask all of you later on. How do you see the state of China-Latin America relations right now? Just to set the stage here, we have the relations that was very different in the Cold War. When you think about it, your home country, Colombia, along with most Latin American countries, were sided with the United States. There were some neutral countries like Mexico, but of course Cuba and Nicaragua were sided with the Soviet Union and therefore China. And in the 1990s, our relations really came a long, long way, and in the 2010s and 2020s, we diversified, strengthened, and intensified our partnerships. In the second decade of the 21st century, where do you see our relations now, and where do you hope it to go?
Well, with Colombia, the relations with China are really deep in trade and commerce. China is maybe one of the biggest trade partners of Colombia. So, and we have acquired that element in the last 20 years, or let's say 25 years. In the past, for sure, United States are our principal trade ally. So it's really important to have more allies in the trade and commerce, because many goods and many products has arrived to our countries in different prices. Let's say in a way less prices, more affordable for our people. So it means new develops for our societies. For sure, our exchange is going to continue. It's going to be deeper and deeper, because every year our nations see more to the Pacific, because we have forgot the Pacific for many years. Let's say in a way, Colombia, its biggest port is in the Pacific, but not the most developed part of the country is in that side. So I believe in the next 20 years, not only with China, also with the countries in the Pacific Ocean, we will grow our trade and commerce exchange, and we will see how far and how deep we can do it. In our countries, the things change mostly with the politics, but for sure, trade and commerce continue and can be reached even more deeper and deeper.
Yeah, very good. Raquel, what is your take on this question? How do you see China-Latin America relations evolving, especially when it comes to China-Brazil, and where do you hope it to go?
Yeah, well, I have served in Asia, I have served in Africa and in Latin America as well.
You did in Asia.
And it was interesting to see how strong was the relationship between China and other Asian countries, and then having lived in Ethiopia as well, like how strong the bonds were between China and Ethiopia and so many other African countries. And this was not something that was so clear crystal to me in Latin America, especially because I work on social development issues and not necessarily on trade. And little by little, I started to see, and I have grown together with this relationship and studying and listening to the importance of South-South collaboration and to the word coining the term the BRICS and all that. So it's very good to see how this relationship has been growing in a way that it's going beyond trade relationships. And I think that any collaboration is very welcomed, and especially if we're talking about southern countries. And Latin American countries are all southern countries. They're all part of the global south, and it's an opportunity for us to go beyond traditional partners and explore new forms of collaboration in a way that we can say that it's almost decolonial as well, right? Because there are no colonial relationships between Latin America and China, which is very different from the reality that we have seen. Like our relationship is quite strong with the countries that colonized the Latin American countries and with the United Nations as well. So the relationship that Latin American countries and China have go way beyond history, right? It's an opportunity, it's a common goal, it's a shared understanding of where the world is going. So it's very interesting to see how this is moving, and it's very good to be part of this and exchanging this with you.
What are your perspectives, and how do you look at this question?
So I think it's important to set the stage, moving further away from only trade, because it's the main issue, the main topic, when people are looking at Brazil and China relationship and Brazil and Latin America and China relationship. And I think it's important to kind of set the tone of what the international system looks like, because it definitely doesn't look like it looked 20 or 50 years ago. Neoliberalism is in crisis, which means that globalization is also in crisis, because when people usually talk about globalization, they usually mean cultural ties and how we're closer together because of technology. But we forget often that globalization is a deeply neoliberal process when we're talking about economics and financing. And so the institutions, especially since the 1970s, the post-war institutions such as the Bretton Woods, the institutions that were created after that, like the IMF and the World Bank, they create constraints for Latin American countries and for countries in the global south in general. Yeah, China is included in that as well, and I think the term global south is also wasn't used up until like 5 years ago maybe. So I think that even the fact that we're talking about Global South in this type of forum is already a good sign of how our relationship is moving farther away from the neoliberal Western model and trying to reshape the global governance and trying to not only sit at the table but create our own tables instead of playing by other people's and other countries' rules. I think it's especially true if we're talking about economic development, because workers from the Global South, they produce 80% of the world's labor but only retain 20% of the profits. And so if we're talking about economic development and we're talking from the Global South and we're sitting at a table at the IMF or at the World Bank and we can't even afford taking out loans because it's in US dollars, and our rates to borrow are much, much higher than Germany's, for example, than the United States, for example. So I think it's not only about reforming the existing institutions, but rather creating institutions that are for the Global South. And I think that the fact that we have these types of discussions to these types of forums is a sign that we're already on the way to changing to something a little more equal, I think.
Yeah. If you look at the global institutions, that is trapping a lot of African countries in a perennial and perpetual debt. Sofia, let me talk to you. You studied cultural diplomacy, which is a very important angle to look at our world today, right? Conflict or clash of civilizations versus a community of shared future. Where do you see the world going?
Thinking first about Brazil and China relations, Latin American and China relations, I tend to agree with what all my colleagues here said. I think we are evolving a lot in the fields of economic exchange, and it has led to a further diplomatic collaborations. In the international organizations, we tend to cooperate more, we tend to agree with each other, or if we have some dissonant opinions, we tend to talking and cooperating to find an agreement, reach a point that is good for all of the countries involved. We have evolved a lot in the economic and diplomatic aspects. But when we are talking in the cultural relations, we have to think that we are not only talking about diplomatic cultural relations, but also cultural relations between societies, between people-to-people relations. And in that point, I see that at least Brazil and China, we have still a long way to go. Because in Brazil, we don't know a lot of things about China. We don't know basic things about Chinese society, about Chinese history. And we don't know very important points of history of Brazil, while our histories has crossed each other. So I think that it's a basic aspect that for reach a bigger cooperation, walk through this path of mutual help and mutual the cooperation through diplomacy to a shared future. We have to look to these aspects to how our societies are knowing each other. I think that academic cooperation is a great step to do this, cooperation between universities that mainly China is promoting a lot. Several Chinese universities reached Brazilian universities to and Asia Studies laboratories, China Study laboratories to make partnerships. And it's very important to us, but it still reaches a small group of people that research China. And I see that it's necessary not to only reach those people to research specifically China, but also the general people who has a lot of prejudices that are influenced by fake news, by hegemonic Western discourse. So we have to trace strategies to deal with that within our society, within people-to-people relations.
Definitely, we need more exchanges and to debunk those fake narratives. Leonidas, that comes to you. I think Marina just raised a very good point in that 5 years ago, or even 4 years ago, we don't hear nearly as much talk about the Global South, but now we do. What do you think, to our friends in the West, what do you think is the aspiration of the Global South? What is the end game of us as a collective, if you can put it that way? Talk to us about your point of view as a media representative.
From my point of view and the media, there is a big opportunity to cooperate between countries and people that are more equal than when we made trade or cooperation between North and South. Nobody has talked in many years of South-South. We have great opportunities. We have shared more elements and common elements that can be implemented in the other countries. For sure, a Colombian has more affinity with a person in Guinea Equatorial than maybe with somebody in Finland, because the weather is different, the meat is different, and the culture could be completely different. So South-South could be the opportunity where we can start sharing our small advances, and we can make it huge and make it with the young people. For the first time, start to involve young people in this initiative is really important, because young people is our future. It's going to be the future of the world. So if the young people are more interrelated, as they do now, because for sure a small Brazilian guy or Colombian guy, for sure now they have a friend in China or in Korea or in Japan. Sometimes there was impossible because the way was not created. Now we have internet, we have many elements. So start thinking in share as equals is going to be better, and it could be make potential, make it better, and in that way we can also continue cooperating with the North countries, but in a different way, when we can appreciate more the cooperation and appreciate more the technology transition and the cultural transition.
There is a necessity to really break away from the narratives against the global south, right? If you look at our colleagues from BBC or CNN or Fox News or Breitbart or those famous American radio show hosts, they frame Colombia in a certain way, right? They know Colombia through Narcos on Netflix. They know about Brazil through football or samba. They think that's all about Brazil. And they look at China as a quote-unquote a communist country, and then as simplistic as such. But we have an issue too, right? The global south is not a monolithic whole. We have varieties and diversities, even differences amongst ourselves. We have different languages and cultures. And how do you think we can forge a more united front than we have now to break through the filters within ourselves to put forth a strong voice?
I think is for the first time is to try to see it, because we don't see the other countries in the south. Latin America, as you told, we have tried to make efforts because we are all mostly in the south. But those efforts always go to somebody in the north. If we start cooperating in the south, making the transition of our knowledge to other countries that are more equal and more similar to us, is going to be easy, and for sure that a snowball is going to be growth and growth, because all of the knowledge, all what the countries can bring to that situation are going to make it bigger. So the only thing that we need to do is to believe that the South can. I think we can believe in a new cooperation way.
Right.
And it's not forgetting the North countries. They have always helped us. They have always been for us there. That is also important.
Yeah.
But we should rewrite what we want.
Yeah, I think we're providing alternatives, not necessarily replacing them. To create this so-called the whole new world. We want a fairer world, the new world in that sense. Raquel, what do you think? I mean, you have been very much involved in youth affairs, empowering youth in Latin America to solve its sustainability and development issues. What do you think can be the message among the global south that is taking shape to make the world fairer?
Yeah, I just want to go back a little bit to what Leonidas was saying about youth, saying that the youth are the future. And I tend to be corrected on this one, but actually the youth are the present, right? They are living right now, and they are actually at this, what we can call a crossroads, right? They are inheriting the challenges of today, but also taking steps and making choices for the future. But still, the places for youth to participate in a meaningful way, they are not really institutionalized. I mean, youth are trying to put their step, they're trying to leverage their participation. They are innovating in so many areas. They are setting so many agendas, but still, and I can say that I'm not a youth in any country in the world, according to the law of the countries, but like there must be some sort of a stronger institutionalization on meaningful youth participation. And this is a discussion that during the Summit of the Future, the Global South countries have led. It's not something that it was led, which is usually led by what we call the Western countries or the Global North. It's youth in Latin America, it's youth in Asia that are leading these initiatives. And today we have a representative from Latin America who is the youth officer within the United Nations, and he spoke earlier at the launch. So I think we, as the Global South, we have a lot to do on that regard. Giving space to youth is very key, and this space should not be a token for participation, right? Because there is always a youth there to talk, but their participation needs to be real. They have to be able to vote and to be listened. And this can only be happening through concrete institutionalization, concrete law.
Great. Marina, you talk about reforming the global systems, are the architecture, and then you did some research on creating a parallel alternative financial architecture that can perhaps expedite that process. You
Yeah.
can talk to us about that.
Perfect. So I think when we talk about globalization and neoliberalism, there tends to be a misconception about what globalization is. But at the core of it, it occurs when we have the reconfiguration of capital. So instead of the normal, the primitive accumulation of capital, where production turns into money because you sell a product, then it's just financial capital, which means money is turning into more money. We also have the process of transnationalization of capital, which is when multinational, they install themselves in countries, especially global south countries, where the labor is cheaper. Obviously, we also have other processes, but these are the main or the core ideas of it. And when we have that, it obviously depends on a currency that's going to make all of that possible, and that is the US dollar. So all the loans, if they're taken with the IMF, the World Bank, all the types of economic processes that a country has to do, so we have to accumulate reserves in US dollars. Brazil and any other country, China has a lot of US Treasury bonds, which are the way in which we accumulate reserves. And we have to do that because we do not issue US dollars, but we have to have issued dollars to do anything to regulate our exchange rates and so on and so on. Besides that, there is a specific thing that has been developed, which is the SWIFT system. I think anyone who studies economics or international relations is aware of what SWIFT is. It's a messaging system. It's not a clearing or settlement system. It just literally sends the message between banks and accounts. So if I transfer you $100, it makes sure that you get the message. And the SWIFT, although created in Belgium, and it's still the headquarters is in Belgium, after 9/11, it was weaponized by the United States within the global war on terror narrative, and through that weaponized to financial sanctions, which is what the United States and the European Union have been doing for the past decades, imposing sanctions on countries that they deem that are their enemies.
Exactly.
So in times of peace, it's disturbing to the economies and to the people because you're disrupting their ability to function, you're freezing their assets and reserves, which it's what is happening right now to Russia. But if you look at Russia right now, for example, they're thriving. Their economy is growing in GDP more than Germany's. And that was what made me think, how are they doing that? Because SWIFT is blocked to them. And I started researching what they call SPFS, which is a system of not only messaging as the SWIFT, but also to clear transactions and to settle transactions. And China is also developing the same thing, which is the SIPs. And so both of these systems are a way to bypass the Western financial sanctions, not only in times of war, which is what's happening right now with Ukraine and Russia, but also to reduce dependence on the West in times of peace, and to create an autonomous, a more autonomous economic process, because otherwise we all depend on Western mechanisms to message ourselves. And then if I'm sanctioned, then I cannot do any type of process. So it's basically these mechanisms of financial compensation that are under the aegis of a broader economic technology and technological and innovation systems that are being developed by China, such as the CBDCs, like the e-renminbi, and Russia has its own credit card system, does not need to use Visa or MasterCard anymore. So it's a broader scope that Brazil is not necessarily on the same path, but it seems like it's also trying, especially right now, to
this
develop.
PIC system that works pretty well. It's everywhere you go. Brazilians are using it, and it's just delivering for the Brazilians.
We have a very advanced financial system, that is correct.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing, and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The G20 Summit in Rio pursues an agenda for a fairer world, a more sustainable planet, focused on the needs of developing economies by accelerating efforts to reduce emissions, increasing access to affordable clean energy and climate financing. Join us on CGTN for our special coverage of the meetings of the G20.
Exchange is going to continue, it's going to be deeper and deeper.
Any collaboration is very welcomed.
Inspire ourselves in the Chinese model, which is much more autonomous.
To borrow the boats to reach the sea.
Sofia, you talk about the deficit in people-to-people exchanges and mutual understandings, and you talk about the necessity of it. But if you think about it, sometimes people-to-people exchanges are really at the mercy of policies and policymakers, right? What do you think can be the way that we can maneuver through or take a crack through the regulations and the policies to really make people among the global South nations to have more nuanced understanding towards one another?
I think that internet is a very a place that has a lot of potential to work people-to-people relations, but it's also a place where we have very nationalized from barriers.
Social media are very fragmented these days, regimented.
Yes.
You know, the Brazilians are using WhatsApp, Chinese are using WeChat, the Russians, Telegram, Japanese Line, you know, you name it. A common Babel Tower remains a lofty goal.
Yes, it's a very controversial place. And one of the main controversial, I think about TikTok specifically, it's a place that Brazilians use every day. But few Brazilians use it to know about China, but it's a Chinese enterprise. If internet is a place, but we have to know how to navigate it. Mm-hmm. That is a question. We have the way, we have the boat, but we don't have the content. I think about the metaphor that's used in great media enterprises in China, that to borrow the boat to reach the sea. And
借船出海, yes. Mr. Lopez, let me ask you, how do you think journalism these days, you are leading this very important alliance of journalism across Latin America, how do you think journalism can better capture and reflect the evolving relations between China and Latin America? What stories need to be told the most?
Well, every day we have exchanged more and more with China. Through our journalists and your journalists, we can show better our countries, our people, our culture. But it's really hard to say what is missing there because we are constructing the relation now. So I think if we can continue in that path, exchanging, sending our journalists there, bringing people from China that can feel better our countries, and if we can understand better your culture, that is the way that the journalist path, the journalist media with China can be broader and broader. Also, there is a space for the technology. You have really big amount of technology that we can take it for our news, for our companies. So we can, I believe it's the cooperation between China and Latin America in media, journalists, it has many, many years more for continued growth.
Yeah. So what is your understanding of China's initiative of building this China-Latin America community of shared future? Of course, we think that the liberal world order dominated by Western conventional powers are not necessarily reflecting the growing interests of the global South.
I think it doesn't matter if what happened in the past. I think we have now started to learn about China, and China how start learning about ours, our cultures, our people, your culture, your people. If we can continue in that way, we can, for sure, in some years, we are going to be more prepared to understand how big, how important, and how powerful could be China, and in the other way. It doesn't matter if we are small countries, but China can understand if we are all together, we can make it great deals with you, great deals in the cultural field, in the economic field, in the political field.
Yeah.
It take it away of being communist or not being communist or being from the right of the left, only of the left. It's only that we can take more advantages of what we can, have each other.
Yeah, more exchanges among journalists, I think. Are
Journalists and
crucial.
everything.
You send the 50 Colombian
television.
journalists to China, vice versa. I
Yeah,
think that
we
will
have
change their worldview, their opinion leaders. Let me turn to Raquel. Raquel, from your point of view, what are the most exciting areas of collaboration between China and Latin America, and your take on the Chinese initiative of building this China-Latin America community of shared future?
Yeah, this is something that I touched upon in my question before, but one thing that I like to say is that partnerships that are built on cultural understanding, they are much more likely to be long-lasting and to be more sustainable. And I think this is what is key on the way forward in this collaboration between Global South countries. And this is something that Sofia touched upon as well. And we still have a long way to go. It is by learning and having this cross-cultural approach that we can find new solutions, find innovation, understanding each other better, so we can move forward and grow together with common, with a shared understanding of the future.
Marina, do you see the Chinese model as attractive? I mean, the China model as it matures, some say there's no definitive definition of it yet, but I think it is taking shape. Having forging win-win partnerships, focusing on building equal relationships, and not having condescending relationships with political strings attached. Respecting others, having this rapport with other peoples. How do you look at the merit of this Chinese model of international relations? Do you think that can be an attractive alternative to conventional Western models?
Yeah, so I think that one of the greatest homework that we have to do, I say specifically to Brazil, is to learn about how China developed itself. Because it did not bend to the neoliberal order. And that is very important because when we're talking about financial resources, especially foreign direct investment, we're talking about, in the case of Brazil, for example, it was a country that developed its industries as enclave economies. So depending on multinational companies and taking out loans in US dollars that were only paid years and years and years later. And what China did was develop the country fully to break down the structural heterogeneity of society. So if companies want to come in, yes, they're welcome to come in, but you should come in not only like downtown in Shanghai, in Beijing. You should also open your factories in places that are not fully developed, because we do not want a fully developed downtown and everyone else living in poverty. If China is the country that has the most capital control for capital flows, which for me as a heterodox economist is incredible, and we have not been doing with the advent of neoliberalism, and that is the reason why it succeeded. If other companies wanted to install themselves in China, they should, and that was mandatory for them, to make a joint venture with the Chinese company, to invest in the company and to create innovation, to create progress, to transfer technology, and not only put the company there and the added value go to the country that did research and development. And even though we do have a president that's very aligned with those issues of developing the country, multilateralism, de-dollarization, our public opinion and most of our economists, they're very orthodox. So for them, when they look at that, when they look at basic Keynesian economics, which is what China has been doing, and it's working because China lifted 800 million people out of poverty. When they look at that, they do not think it's feasible for Brazil and for the other countries, precisely because of what all of us are talking about here: Western narrative, domination, neoliberalism, globalization. Because the model that has been put forth is the neoliberal economic order. And so I think that the path that we should follow is not only to gain cultural ties, but also to inspire ourselves in the Chinese model, which is much more autonomous and much more invested in creating equality inside. Because if we don't create equality inside, cooperating with Chinese companies and the government, then nothing else works. And I think that China has proven that. If it doesn't work inside, if you don't prosper inside, then you shouldn't do cooperation. I think it's a step forward to kind of learn that as well. But that's kind of difficult to change because it's in the mindset of people. The neoliberal, there's no free lunch, government shouldn't spend, and China has showed the opposite. Government spending through autonomous investment, creating public transportation that works, and innovation, and so on and so on. So I think it's a challenge, but yeah, I think we can inspire.
Yeah, it's very well said. It's a difficult experiment back in the 70s. When you think about China was still doing class struggles and anti-US imperialist revolutions and slogans, publicity, shifting from that to a market economy with Chinese characteristics, introducing foreign capital, foreign investment, privatizing some sectors. Has been a difficult journey, not without its ups and downs, but we're happy that some progress was made, and thanks, of course, along the way to our Latin American brothers and sisters. Sofia, what do you think? I mean, when it comes to the question of China-Latin America community, of a common future, of a shared future, what does this mean to you?
I think I agree with Marina when you said we have to learn how China developed it itself, but and now also in the way you're building your thoughts, that all of us has a way to go through, but we can look to the ways each other have gone, so we inspire ourselves to go. Be in a place where you can see each other without a previous judgment and classifying, oh, this is good or this is bad, before we even know what is happening. It's a very important thing. So we have to invest a lot in knowledge. Literally say everything is a lot of things, but in our economic development, in our cultural development, in our diplomatic developments of both countries, that we can compare and see what were the things that worked, what were the things that didn't work. Here in Brazil, we have an expression that is todo mundo vê os pulos que eu dou, mas ninguém vê.
All the world is one.
Everyone see the jumps I make.
The hoops I go through.
Yeah, mas ninguém vê os tombos que eu caio.
Which is?
But no one sees
how I tumble.
How I tumble. Everybody sees how I jump, but nobody sees how I tumble. So everybody's looking now at China and see, look at this prosperous country, how it's gone through there, nobody knows. We have to see this process, and we have to be generous as Latin Americans when we look at ourselves to see, okay, we have tumbled, but what can we do to jump to in this process? So I think thinking a little bit in intercultural relations that giving me hope, and where we can build these spaces to trace the spaces to see each other. I think this initiative of today have shown a very interesting prospect. I'm very curious about the project of movie cooperation, cinematographic cooperation between countries of Global South. It seems a very good proposal where to how to build these places, the spaces of cooperation for us.
Very good. I want to do another round of general questions. What is one key idea or initiative you would like to see happening that could bring the regions China and Latin America and Caribbean countries closer together, and that would bring benefits, tangible benefits to all sides. Starting from you, Leonidas.
Seeing completely improved and put in the way that the youth of the South-South. See people cooperating South-South, young people, countries, everything in the South.
Okay, very good. Raquel?
Yeah, I think for me, and I might be a bit repetitive, but it is to start with the young people. I think we cannot start with the generation that holds power right now. We have to start with the one that is coming. Otherwise, this relationship will not be sustainable.
But young people also need to, maneuver through the politics, the frameworks that the older people establish for them before they can call the shot. No?
They do. But that comes from the state as well, right? To invest on them so they can understand it better and they can be better leaders in the future.
Yeah.
So that would be my take.
Marina, what do you think?
I don't think my answer could be any other than the transformation of monetary relations in this hierarchical space. I think that even when we don't see it, and precisely when we don't see it, it affects the reproduction of our material life. So definitely some sort of bypass process so that we can all enjoy more equitable international monetary system.
Yeah, we do need that to be changed. Sofia?
I think a possibility that Leonidas me is that we have to think our relations as intercultural relations, not only uncultural and one country dialoguing with other culture and other country. You have to see how we affect each other and how so we can understand how to build our relations to a shared future that we want to be to.
All right, on that note, thank you all so very much for being part of this China Media Group, CGTN, China-Latin America Roundtable. We hope that your voices were heard, and I'm sure they are. And welcome to China on behalf of our crew in the foreseeable future to check out our pretty incredible country, I would say. Not only Shanghai and Beijing, but also smaller cities, such as my hometown, Shandong. The invitation is open. It's going to be great. Thank you so very much again.
Thank you very much.
And with that,
Thank
we
you.
come to the end of this edition of China Latin America Youth Roundtable. Thank you so much for tuning in wherever you are. I'm Guan in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'll see you again next time.